Amen. We welcome you to the church this morning. You can take your seat. We're speaking on the topic, take heed. Can I hear you say, take heed? There's a global revolution in almost all sectors of life. If you go to the field of education, there is an overwhelming invention, and there are indications that in the near few years, thousands will get out of their jobs as a result of artificial human beings. They call it AI-enabled human beings that are stepping into the field of humanity. So you get to the airport, it is an artificial human being that is attending to you. And is programmed to display the instructions with so many conditions that can guide that AI instrument to function effectively as a human being. You move away from there, you see also in the field, even in the field of sports, fantastic developments. Errors that were made yesterday can no longer be made today ordinarily. Because besides the referee and the official linesman, there is also an electronic referee. They call it a VAR, Video Assistant Referee. And the errors that the normal human being will make, the VAR replay will enable the human being to come back to his real senses and do the right. And so in almost every sector of life, there is a new development. In Christendom, we also have new developments. There are certain men that have crept into the fold. And they have a mission. And they have a vision. And Satan has sufficiently empowered them. But some of them, the charisma is there. The eloquence is there. And many have been deceived by these charismatic agents that stand behind the pulpit, dissuading men that are hungry for the word into crisis of life, into calamity of life. And Paul warned when he wrote to the church at Corinth, because that was an intelligent church. That was a well-gifted church. A church that was blessed with all manner of gifts. And Paul had to charge them in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 12. Wherefore, let him that thinketh he standeth take heed, lest he falls. But the unfortunate thing today is that nobody seems to take heed. Especially those that stand behind the pulpit. By virtue of their audience, they have arrived. But if there is ever a season, if there is ever a period If there is ever a time that the Christian community needs to get up and take heed, it is now. And church, I want to let you know that even those you follow in your early morning calls or whatever you call it, that they have so many crowd of people and they spend how many hours in the early hours of the morning praying, and you follow them online, you have to take heed. Who is he? And where is he coming from? The fact that there are crowds of people following does not in any way authenticate the leadership of that man. The fact that there are miracles people testify does not in any way authenticate that individual if he does not stand on the black and white of the scriptures. Something happened in Exodus chapter 7. When Moses was face to face with Pharaoh in verse 9. When Pharaoh shall speak unto you, saying, show me a miracle for you, then thou shalt say unto Aaron, take thy rod and cast it before Pharaoh, and it shall become a serpent. That wasn't too much of a strange thing to the magicians of Pharaoh. So if your basis of following strange people is on the fact that the miracles are there, then you are wrong. You are wrong. When you gravitate to verse 10, you will read that when Moses and Aaron had performed this remarkable miracle, the Bible tells us, and Moses and Aaron went in unto Pharaoh, and they did so as the Lord had commanded, and Aaron cast down his rod before Pharaoh and before his servants, and it became a serpent. Look at what verse 11 tells us. Verse 11 says, then Pharaoh also called the wise men and the sorcerers, now the magicians of Egypt, they also did in like manner with their enchantment. For they cast down every man his rod, and they became serpents. But Aaron's rod did what? Swallowed up their rods. Be careful who you follow. Do you know that of recent one very popular, and is popular among the youth? That's the one that the youths have uplifted and they are carrying. He has directed his audience that they should go to herbalists for their solutions. So if there is a season for the church to rise up and take heed, it is now. Success does not always amount to success until it is proven. The rod of Aaron produced success. The rods of the magicians also produced success. But that success was subjected to being proven. We have a catalog of people in the Bible that in their days were simply unstoppable. There were men that in every human estimation, they were accomplished. One of such men was Joab, that worked under David. Joab rose up to the defense of the nation. Joab rose up to stand to ensure that the nation of Israel, Judah in particular, was defended. And Joab and David. So David, from all the lines of scriptures, it points to the fact that Joab had gotten such a level of ascendancy that David was actually reverencing Joab. There were instructions that were given out to Joab not to carry, and Joab made sure that he did what pleased him. There are clear instances in the scriptures. One of such moments was when Abner struck a peace deal with David after the death of Saul. Israel had continued as a separate nation. Judah had continued as a separate nation. And Abner stood with Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, that assumed authority. And for close to 7 years, they held David to a standstill. Not until in 2 Samuel, Bible tells us in chapter 3 that Abner had a misunderstanding with Ishbosheth. And he came and negotiated with David that he will hand over the entire nation of Israel to David. Unfortunately, Joab was not there. When Joab came back, and information was given to Joab that Abner came and discussed with the boss and had gone. David knew the person of Joab. And Joab told David that he has made the greatest mistake of his life. But David was letting Joab know that it was a peace deal, and it was certain that the nation will now be united. But Joab loved after Abner. And when you look at it from 2 Samuel chapter 3, from verse 22 down, the Bible tells us that Joab went after Abner, and he was able to track Abner down. And he exterminated, he extinguished, he killed Abner. And news came to David, and it was a great pain to David. David lamented over the death of Abner. But we do not hear any caution to Joab concerning the death of Abner. As if that was not enough, he proceeded in 2 Samuel chapter 18. When you read from verse 1, when Absalom rose up and staged a serious coup against the father, and David numbered the people and there that were with him, and set captains of thousands and captains of hundreds over them. Verse 2, and David sent forth a third part of the people under the hand of Joab, and a third part under the hand of Abishai, and a third part under Joab's brother, who was Abishai, and a third part under the hand of Ittai the Gittite. And the king said unto the people, I will surely go forth with you also. But they forbade him from going. Look at verse 5. Look at the instruction the king gave in verse 5. And the king commanded Joab and Abishai and Ittai. These were the three commanders that were in charge of the different battalions that were going after Absalom. And he said, deal gently for my sake. With who? With a young man. Even with Absalom. Every other person heard that charge. But Joab brought Absalom down. He never bothered whose ox was Gog. A servant ran and said he had seen Absalom in a desperate mood. And Joab asked, why didn't you kill him? He said, no, that the Lord my king had forbid everyone from laying hold on him. And Joab dispelled the instruction of King David and went and killed Absalom. It never stopped there. The next in line was in that same 2 Samuel chapter 20, when Amasa, there was this shepherd, the son of Bichri, that rose up, a Benjamite. He rose up and blew the trumpet and instructed all Israelites to go to their tent, that they do not have any portion in the son of Jesse, being David the king. And so David called on Amasa and instructed Amasa to get the army ready. In the next 3 days, but after 3 days, Amasa did not come. Joab now organized the boys and they had to go after Sheba. When they went after this young man, he escaped for his dear life. And they got to a small city and the city was fenced round. And they were to use their battering ram approach to jack the fence and bring down so that it would collapse on everybody. But there was a white woman who asked whom they were looking for. And when Joab mentioned that they were looking for Amasa, that woman went, cut off the head of Amasa and threw it to Joab. And that was when the war ended and he came back home. You know what? He had risen to that extent where he seemed to have life and death in his hands. Even more than the king. Even more than the king. So Joab was in a good position to have averted the death of Uriah. He would have corrected his boss. When David for once turned away from God and had a romance with the devil, he shook his hands with the devil. And with that handshake, the devil gave to him every weapon that he needed in order to clean up the mess in his life. And when he had tried option A, tried option B, and none worked, he had to go into writing a letter to Joab, telling Joab to restructure the army and put Uriah in the hottest battle so that he will be brought down. No, Joab had what it takes to have corrected his boss. That this is a young man that has the integrity, that has the patriotic nature of the nation at heart. He was fighting for the nation. He was defending the cause of the nation. Why do we, at this point in time, send him forth and withdraw so he can be killed? No, Joab would have torn that letter severally into pieces and dump it and preserve the life of Uriah. But because Joab seemed to have life and death in his hands, he re-strategized, he restructured, and sent Uriah, an innocent man, one that upheld the integrity of Israel more than that of his family. And news came back to David. The deed has been done. So if there was a man that was fulfilled, Joab was fulfilled. But you know what? When Adonijah rose up and ganged up with his team, Joab followed Adonijah. That's in 1 Kings. He followed Adonijah. When you read from verse 5 to 8, Adonijah made an unbeatable feast, and they all sat down and they were eating and they were rejoicing that their new king had come. In fact, one would have expected, in my own assessment as a theology student, I had expected Joab to have even taken over the nation of Israel at the expiration of David's life. So shockingly, he aligned with Adonijah. And the Bible tells us that Adonijah was a young man that the father has never displeased. But that your father has never displeased you does not give you a license for evil. It doesn't. So when Solomon was finally crowned, the Bible tells us that Joab heard of the coronation of Solomon. And he ran to the altar, held the horns of the altar. And news came to Solomon that Joab was in the sanctuary and at the altar holding onto the horns of the altar. And Solomon asked them to go and call him. Possibly, he would have sentenced Joab to house arrest. Or one thing or the other. He's asked for Joab to be brought. And Joab sent back word to Solomon that he will not come. He will prefer to die at this altar. You know what? Solomon sent his boy. According to what he has said, go and do exactly that. Brethren, that's the way Joab died. Take heed. Take heed. That's a man that was so well known in Israel. He never died a peaceful death. In 1 Corinthians chapter 3. 1 Corinthians chapter 3 verse 9 and 10. For we are laborers together with God. And ye are God's husbandry. Ye are God's building. According to the grace of God which is given unto me. Listen carefully. There is a grace that has been released upon you. I said there is a grace that has been released upon you. According to the grace of God which is given unto me, as a wise master builder, I have laid the foundation, and another builded thereon. But let every man take heed how he builded thereupon. Let no one tell you that the church is without laws. Let no one tell you that the church is without rules. The church is with laws. The church is with rules. That's why I began on the note I began. That don't be carried over by the charismatic men we have on the altar today. One now, the latest is that each day he comes up, he is to disfigure one portion of the Bible or the other. And listen, church, whenever a man begins to argue with God, that man is wrong. He first came up on board that there is nothing like heaven at last. While they were yet to settle down on that one, he came up again that there is nothing like tithing. While the church was yet to settle down on that one, he came up again that he wished he had never built a church. He had built an auditorium, a cinema, a theater room where people will come, or a supermarket. Who has bewitched you? Each new day is the dawn of a strange doctrine. And what baffles the heart is the overwhelming young boys, the overwhelming young girls that are there to cheer him up, that are there to clap him and to send him to more error. Our fathers of faith have laid the foundation. We are building upon the foundation that our fathers of faith laid. Let's be careful. Let's be careful. Those of you who are privileged to have your own houses, you will take notice that when the foundation of that house was being laid, a hole was dug. They dug a hole into the ground, and then they had to lay blocks down, some 5 blocks down, and then they began to bring the blocks up as they were laying one block upon another. You are careful not to make sure that those blocks are laid off the line. And the builders are very sensitive to details. They have their plumb line, and when the plumb line does not agree, they insist that the plumb line must reach that perfect angle before they can continue to the next block. So let every man take heed. Let every man take heed. Women, you know where you go to. And strange men have laid hands on your heads. After Power Clinic on Tuesday, there is another one at Bundu Waterside. In fact, there is one currently at Railway Axis. And you know all where these nocturnal place churches are located. You know their addresses. You know their operational models. One of our sisters ventured into such a church, and when she entered, she didn't know that that was the day she was going to resurrect problems for herself. That very day, when she came back, flies invaded her kitchen. And she made the mistake of calling an evangelist, Pastor Philip, of blessed memory. Pastor Philip gave it to him. Flies. Don't you have shell talks? But she knew that she needed to call a pastor, so she called me. And I landed there because the pastor will always. So when I got there, she downloaded the story that transpired. The husband that has died several years ago suddenly resurfaced after that encounter with that strange man. Take heed, even to what you hear. Take heed. Christianity is what we should take details. Details. So Paul insisted, the foundation has been laid. And whoever is building on that foundation must build appropriately. In Isaiah chapter 38. Isaiah chapter 38. We read from verse 1. In those days was Hezekiah sick unto death. And Isaiah the prophet, the son of Amos, came unto him and said unto him, Thus said the Lord, set thine house in order, for thou shalt die and not live. Verse 2. Then Hezekiah turned his face toward the wall and prayed unto the Lord, and said, Remember now, O Lord, I beseech thee, how I have walked before thee in truth and with a perfect heart, and have done that which is good in thy sight. And Hezekiah wept sore. Then came the word of the Lord to Isaiah, saying, Return, go back to Hezekiah, and tell him his prayers have been answered. And his years will be lengthened by 15 good years. God was specific. So this is the man that had a timetable of the rest of his life. He said his years will be lengthened by 15 more years. Not 15 days, 15 more years. Chapter 9, verse 1. Chapter 39. Chapter 39, Isaiah 39, verse 1. And at that time, Merodach-Baladan, the son of Baladan, king of Babylon, sent letters and a present to Hezekiah. Take note. It was after the success of his bouncing back. It was after the certification of 15 more years that an ungodly king sent felicitations to him, sent a congratulatory note to him. And Hezekiah was so glad. And so he received the note from those fellows and the gifts from those fellows. And the Bible tells us in the continuing verses that Hezekiah brought them in to the house. And he opened up the entire place and showed them. Look at verse 2. Look at verse 2. And Hezekiah was glad of them and showed them the house of his precious things, the silver and the gold and the spices and the precious ointment and all the house of his armor and all that was found in his treasuries. There was nothing in his house, nor in all his dominion, that Hezekiah showed them not. Be careful. One of the most difficult things to control is success. I have 15 more years. So he opened up his entire domain to the enemy, so that when they strike, they will know where exactly to go to pick for whatever they want to pick. Have you not opened up to the enemy? On Thursday, I met with a young man, precious young man, I just recovered from a near suicide attempt. 36-year-old man. What was it? He was dating a girl. He said they were courting. He was courting a girl for 7 good years. And I asked him, does your church not have rules and regulations that you were courting for 7 years? She's not a member of our church anyway. So they courted for 7 years. And incidentally, this young girl is of a different church. He is of a different church, but they work in the same office. 2 weeks to the wedding of the girl, she brought the young man her wedding card. So obviously, she was concurrently running with 2 young men, so that if A disappoints, I will fall on B. If B disappoints, I will fall on A. And she never let this young man know that she has another man she seemingly prefers more than this man. And for 7 years, she benched this man. So when he saw the wedding card, God helped that day that he never committed suicide. He looked at himself, 7 years gone. I would have been married at 29, or at best at 30. But a young girl kept you for 7 years. Are you here? And there is one that is gravitating towards your life. And you are asking questions. Why must Pastor Sule know? Marriage committee, must Pastor Sule know? And you are asking nonsense questions. Take it. Take it. Because when what will happen, that is why we have caution. Run with the caution. Don't think you are a free man. 7 years. And the boy asked himself, what is the essence of living? Remember, I said the worst is that they work in the same office. And I asked him, did the girl change office? He says, sir, the girl didn't change office. No, there are some wicked people. Wicked people. They toy with human emotions. So this king that had 15 more years opened up the chambers, opened up the doorway, and he didn't know that he was opening up the doorway to the potential enemy that would strike. Verse 3 of that same 39. Then came Isaiah the prophet. Isaiah was not tired. And I prayed, don't be tired in bringing God's good news. I said, don't be tired in relaying God's good news. Isaiah had come the first time, the prophecy seemingly failed. He said, prepare your heart because he will surely die. And as he was going out, God called Isaiah, go back. I have never seen a man fear death like Hezekiah. I have never seen a man cry like Hezekiah. Go back and tell him he will live for 15 years. And Isaiah went back and told him, 15 years have been added to your age. And he left. And when he left, he opened up the doors and the enemy came in. And God told Isaiah, go again. Let's read. Then came Isaiah the prophet unto King Hezekiah and said unto him, what said these men? And from whence came they unto thee? And Hezekiah said, they are come from a far country unto me, even from Babylon. And you know, Babylon is a potential enemy nation. Then said he, what have they seen in thy house? And Hezekiah answered, all that is in my house have they seen. There is nothing among my treasures that I have not showed them. Then said Isaiah to Hezekiah, hear the word of the Lord of hosts again. Behold, the days come that all that is in thy house and that which thy fathers have laid up in store until this day, that means the labor, the toiling of your fathers until this day shall be carried away to Babylon. Nothing shall be left, said the Lord. Was this not sufficient for Hezekiah to turn his face again and to cry unto God that the labors of our fathers will not go in vain, that the labors of our fathers will be restored? The Bible tells us that Hezekiah told Isaiah, good be the word of the prophet, provided it doesn't happen in my days. Hey! that man was worthy to be stoned. He said, good is the word of the prophet. So as far as it concerns his death, nothing is good. But as far as it concerns the sweeping away of Israel into crisis. And of course, you know, I've mentioned it here, that the book of Isaiah is divided into three parts. From Isaiah chapter 1 to Isaiah chapter 39, it is the pre-exilic period. From chapter 40 to chapter 54, it is the exilic period. That is the period they were in exile. And then from 55 down to 66, it is the post-exilic period when they came back. And Israel suffered. Israel was tortured and tormented. Why? The legacy the father handed over to them. Is that the legacy you want to leave for your children? Legacy of tears, legacy of crisis, legacy of calamity. And the funniest part is that his son Manasseh was born into the third year of his extension life. So Manasseh became the king of Judah when he was 12 years old, and he governed for 55 years. Wicked man. And I wonder why wicked men live like that. He committed evil of impregnable capacity. He was ripping women off their pregnancy. Manasseh, king of Israel, the product of Hezekiah. When was he born? Into the 3 years of extension period. That's why Isaiah chapter 57 tells us in verse 1. That the righteous perisheth and no man laid it to heart. And merciful men are taken away, and none considering that they are righteous, that the righteous is taken away from what? From the evil to come. If Hezekiah had died at the point of appointment, we wouldn't have had Manasseh. Israel would have been spared of the calamity that befell them in the reign of Manasseh. Take heed. Young boys, take heed. Young girls, take heed. Whatever that is in the atmosphere, you download it and you swallow it hook, line, sinker. As the principal of a secondary school, we had to battle with a young boy because an atmosphere, a strange atmosphere crept into the school. And we had a set of boys that no longer believed in wearing belts and in putting on inner wear. And they called themselves the Malians. So a day came when one of them manifested strangely. And when we observed, we discovered that it was the Malian spirit that has taken over that individual. I hope you have heard of Malian in Lagos. Those are the people the young boys are imitating. No belt. So the trouser is sacking and they are struggling with it. Because the Malian don't believe in belt. They don't believe in inner wear. And other associated evils that follow. And it's a strange generation. Very strange. Your child is getting into the university, you need to do prayer and fasting. Because that's a different world on its own. He looks at you calmly, but unknown to you, he is gone, and gone. Into drugs. It's not part of what you bargained for. It begins with appearance. What is fashionable is what they don't want. Fashionable in the Lord is what they don't want. And the entire atmosphere stings with evil and with wickedness. It stings. Look at a few steps that we must take heed. Mark chapter 14. We read from verse 27. And Jesus said unto them, all ye shall be offended because of me this night. For it is written, I will smite the shepherd, and the sheep shall be scattered. I will smite the shepherd, and the sheep shall be scattered. Why is it that we do not have people that belong to one church today? Why? Why is it that we do not have people that believe in a shepherd over them? An average Christian has so many pastors around him, so that when a member is telling you, her pastor, his pastor, be careful to know the name of that pastor, because you don't know the one she's referring to. This was a forewarning. Jesus was telling the disciples, crisis loomed ahead, but we must be careful. We must rise up to the task. Verse 28. But after that I am risen, I will go before you into Galilee. 29. But Peter said unto him, although all shall be offended, yet will not I. Yet will not I. Your boast is not on your personal self. Your boast and survival is in the Lord. There were proactive measures that Jesus had taken to put in place, but they all faltered. They all faltered. Let's read on. Let's read on. And Jesus said unto them, verily I say unto thee, that this day, even in this night, before the cock crew twice, thou shalt deny me thrice. But he spake the more vehemently, if I should die with thee, I will not deny thee in any wise. Likewise also said they all. They all chorus, we will not deny you. We will die with you. Have you seen a fly following a corpse? As we are lowering, the fly is going down. But when you start feeling, watch that fly. It will take off. So they made up their minds. But there was something missing. Something was missing. And they came to a place which was named Gethsemane. And he said to his disciples, sit ye here while I shall pray. And he taketh with him Peter, with him James, with him John, and began to be sore amazed and to be very heavy. And said unto them, my soul is exceeding sorrowful unto death. Tarry here and watch. It was an invitation to pray. And he had collected Peter, he had taken James, he had taken John, and he went a step further. Peradventure, the faithlessness of these ones was slack the faith of these three. He knew that these were the boys of the inner carcass. So he took them aside. They went further. He benched them here. Pray. But I want to say to you, sleeping when you should be praying is a dangerous event in the life of a Christian. And these are the days when Christians have picked up sleep in the place of praying. Peter was strong. I went further a little while and fell on his ground and prayed that if it were possible, the hour must pass from me, or this hour must pass from me. And he said, verse 36, Abba, Father, all things are possible unto thee. Take away this cup from me. Nevertheless, not what I will, but what thou wilt. And he cometh and findeth them what? He cometh and findeth them what? Sleeping, and said unto Peter, do what? Simon, sleepest thou? Couldest not thou watch 1 hour? We must renew the place of prayer if we must survive these days. Can I hear an amen? Renew the place of prayer. And commitment to him. Commitment to him. And you know, because prayer is the weapon with which we fight battles. In 2 Corinthians chapter 10 verse 4, that's the weapon with which we fight battles. And that is also the weapon for which the devil uses to destroy. He tries as much as possible to disorganize us. He tries as much as possible to destabilize us and to bring us out from our knees. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds. Do you know that it is when you kneel down to pray that important calls begin to come in? Calls that never came when you were sitting and watching strange videos. Those calls never came. But as soon as you kneel down, it is an important call you must not miss. But I want to submit to you this day, don't ever pick a call when you are praying. As you sit down, kneel down to pray, that is when you remember where you have forgotten where you kept the money. You remember where you have already forgotten where you kept the money. And you will stand up to go and look for the money. And lo, you will see it. That is when your mind will be wondering, when is market? When is market? On the knees of prayers. Because Satan knows that our battles are strong. Jesus told them to sleep on because it was too late. Sleeping when you should be praying. Sleeping when you should be praying. In Ephesians chapter 6 verse 12. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Number 2, avoid confidence in the flesh. Avoid every form of confidence in the flesh. Mark chapter 14, verse 27 to 29. Mark 14. 27 to 29. He said, and Jesus said unto them, all ye shall be offended because of me this night. For it is written, I will smite the shepherd and the sheep shall scatter. 28. But after that I am risen, I will go before you into Galilee. Even when he arose, they were still doubtful. There was nothing that happened as a post-resurrection moment that they were not informed. Even when he arose from the grave, they were wondering what might have happened to him. But Peter said unto him, although all shall be offended, yet will I not be offended. That was Peter. The worst aspect, again, is in that same Mark chapter 14, following from afar. And there are many today that are following us from afar. They have been in redemption ministries for this number of years, but they are following from afar. Look at Mark chapter 14. Mark 14, verse 54. That's in Mark 14, verse 54. And they came over, and Peter followed him afar off. When you are afar off, you will not see far. You have a short-sighted moment. And what baffles us is the fact that so many follow from afar. There's a young man. I think I cited him during the national retreat. He knew the foundation of redemption ministries. According to him, one of the first house fellowships was established in the Father's house. But when I saw him in redemption, I have never seen him as a serious man. He was one that was following from afar. But somehow, when he crossed over to another side, I could see earnestness in him. I could see zealousness in him, to the point that he refused to give blood to rescue the life of his wife. because his religion, that's his new religion, does not uphold the issuance of blood. Transfusion of blood, you call it. So you can see the tenacity with which false doctrine is upheld. And that is how it parades itself. Every sect that parades false doctrine will always have a way of advancing it whenever they approach you. They don't know that they are ordained to preach the whole counsel. Like one bishop said several years ago, I attended his meeting and he taught on faith. My, oh my, that was one of the most famous teachings I attended. You could get up from that teaching and go to this river to work on the river. But you know what? In the course of the meeting, he said the people call him, Bishop, why don't you preach on born again and so on and so forth? He tells them that God never called him to talk on born again. God called him to preach on faith. Meanwhile, as a pastor, you have the responsibility to preach the whole counsel. That's why one misguided one came on board and was saying that John was killed because he ventured into an area that he was never called. That John was never called to be a marriage counselor. That his problem began when he left his first calling and was now teaching on marriage. Can we see what people are suffering from? One-sided message. So nobody is born again because he was never called to preach born again. He was called to preach faith. So when they follow from afar, let's be careful. Let's be careful. So he followed from afar. So he was not close to the word. He wasn't close to the reality. When you follow from afar, the Bible speaking in 2 Corinthians chapter 6 verse 17 tells us, wherefore come out from amongst them. Come out. Don't follow from afar. Distinguish yourself. Be separate from them. Set an example. Evil tradition set an example that, look, for me, this tradition can't hold. But the most unfortunate thing is that even those we look up to are following from afar when it comes to traditional right. They must do it to the latter. They say, Pastor, just leave them. Just leave them. That's what they do. And so the unbelievers are the ones setting the pace in the community. No wonder the community has remained dark age community. But we had a people that were ready to rather die than to have that evil continue to thrive. Are you not following from afar? Are you not following him from afar? Number 3, finding warmth in the enemy's camp. Look at verse 54. Verse 54. It said, and Peter followed him afar off, even into the place of the high priest, and he sat where the servants did what? With the servants, and warmed himself at the what? There was problem. Oh. There was problem. There was problem. When a man is cool inside, it will manifest outside. At the point that your boss, you have abandoned all. For 3.5 years, you have worked with this man. And the information is that he has been carried into the camp of the enemy, and you are cold. Then there is something wrong with you. Something is wrong. He was cold. The circumstances around were such that could keep a man warm. My boss that has worked with me, my boss that I've seen bring back the dead, my boss that I've seen raise the lame, My boss that I've seen open the eyes of the blind and they want to handle him this way. That is enough to charge a man to move up and down. Like he had said, if I die, I will die with you. But the Bible tells us that Peter had gone so cold that he was now warming himself in the enemy's camp. And there are so many that have gone cold. And it's a reflection of what is inside. You can't hide. No, you can't hide it. There are people who find warmth in worldliness. There are people who find warmth in denial of the truth. But may you find warmth in God in the name of Jesus Christ. Find warmth in him. When you look at verse 51, you see a young man. Look at verse 51. And there followed him a certain young man, having a linen cloth cast about his naked body. And the young man and the young men laid hold on him. Look at verse 52 quickly. And he left the linen cloth and did what? And fled from them naked. Who was that? Who was that? John Mark, the writer of Mark. That was his ministry, running away. That was what his running away that caused problems between Paul and Barnabas. So you can see that this was a moment of survival of the fittest. I pray God will preserve you. I said, I pray God will preserve you. He took off. And it was not a small run. Even that means he was running naked. That's to tell you that he just woke up from sleep and saw the scene. And so he was running, my master, my master. And when those that were around held him by the cloth, he said, it is better I go naked than this cloth. When I survive, I'll get another cloth. Am I right? When I survive, I'll get another cloth. Am I right? That was the principle on which this undisclosed man, which in every theological sense, it must be John Mark, that wrote the book of Mark. Do you run away at the hour of need? Do you depend on God at the hour of need? We had the sad moment way back in my office in school then to break the news of our investigation to a Christian mother. We told her that your daughter left the house for night vigil with her phone. And around 1 o'clock, when the night vigil was hot, somebody came and called her out from the night vigil and defiled her. It was like heaven should come down. You know what that woman cried in her lamentation? She asked God, could it be the little backsliding I have backslided that you are punishing me with the behavior of my daughter? That was her lamentation. Don't backslide. The consequences are heavy. The consequences are grievous. And to you children, take heed. The atmosphere is sufficiently charged with evil, looking for who to prey upon. May you not be a victim. I said, may you not be a victim. But look at what Paul said in Galatians chapter 1, reading from verse 15. Galatians chapter 1, reading from verse 15. But when it pleased God, who separated me from my mother's womb and called me by his grace, to reveal his Son in me, that I might preach him among the heathen, immediately, I conferred not with flesh and blood, 17. Neither went I up to Jerusalem to them which were apostles before me, but I went into Arabia. Arabia was a desert place. Arabia was a desert place where those who want to be meaningful in life are trained. When he received the calling, he did not just hurry up to Jerusalem. In fact, if he had hurried up to Jerusalem, he would have received the worst of his ever imagination. So he needed to go through a desert experience. There is a season to be alone. There's a season to stop talking. Young men, there is a season to clue unto him so that your future can be preserved. So he never conferred with flesh and blood, but he went into Arabia and returned again unto Damascus. And this was after a season of 3 years. 3 years. Building up himself in the Lord Jesus. Building up himself. Then after 3 years, I went up to Jerusalem to see Peter. He had a specific mission to see Peter. And he abode with Peter for over 2 weeks. He didn't see many of them. But when he had seen Peter for 2 weeks, he came back home. He was building up himself. Peter was there before him. But a few days after Paul had been co-opted into the system entirely, Paul stood in that same Galatians chapter 2 verse 11, and he warned Peter, for Peter misbehaved. But when Peter was come to Antioch, I withstood him to his face because he was to be blamed. This was the apostle that had the privilege of dwelling and dining with Christ. Paul, a latecomer, was enlightened, was open to the point that he could correct Peter. He said in 2 Corinthians, let's read chapter 2 verse 1 of that same Galatians, chapter 2 verse 1. Galatians 2 verse 1. Go back to verse 1. Then 14 years after, I went up again to Jerusalem and with Barnabas, and took Titus with me also. And I went up by revelation and communicated unto them that gospel which I preached among the Gentiles. That was 14 years after he was stabilized. 14 years in education field is enough for you to back a degree. It's enough. So he went up to communicate. In conclusion this morning, let's look at 1 Corinthians chapter 9 verse 24. Know ye not that they which run in a race run all, but one receiveth the prize. So run that ye may obtain. Young girls, there's a prize you have to obtain. Forget about those juicy text messages that strange men are sending to you. Take it. They tell you that the last time that you stood with them, it was like Jesus himself came down. In fact, that was the night they had the longest sleep of their life. And your eyes are rotating like pussy eyes. You don't know that you are being carried like a sheep to be slaughtered. Verse 27 tells us where we will end this morning on that note. He said, but I keep under my body and bring it into subjection, lest that by any means, when I have preached to others, I myself should be a castaway. Bring yourself under subjection. The days are evil. The signs are all over the atmosphere. Who are you following? Let us pray.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share.